Chapter 16. Nina's office was located above her most popular nightclub, Club En-Vee. The place had changed names and management numerous times over the last decade or so, every time some egregious crime happened on the property. The last incarnation had changed management after a girl was gang raped inside the club's VIP lounge. The club had reopened a week later. Nina knew how to adapt. It was a Monday afternoon, and the place was shuttered. Z insisted on dropping me off a couple of blocks away from the actual club due to turf concerns. As an employee of a rival department, he didn't want to be seen as trespassing, especially with a judge in the back seat. Unless you were a department head, you did not fuck with Nina. By the time I got to the front door of the club, I was starting to feel my injuries. The cold did not help. It made the side of my face where my ear was missing ache, and even though my new coat was warm and my injured hand was inside its pockets, my hand was burning where my fingers had been. The rest of me was just numb. I could see light behind the curtains on the second floor of the building. It was a renovated warehouse in the downtown industrial district. It looked like every other brick building surrounding it. An unlit neon sign proclaimed its latest name with a huge lipstick kiss underneath. The front door's glass was painted black, and there were no cars on the street. I could see shadows move across the windows above. Someone was here. Not customers, too early in the week and early in the day for that. And the snow would be keeping all but the most desperate home tonight. It was a good time for a surprise visit. I knew no one would answer the front door, so I went around to the service entrance at the back and knocked. No answer, so I banged on the door with my fist. I could hear someone behind the door, and then the shriek of a metal chair being pulled along a concrete floor. An annoyed-looking redcap's face appeared in the door window. I flashed him my badge, and he cursed and then hopped down. I could hear muffled conversation behind the door, and then the horrible screeching again as they pulled the chair away. When the door opened, two very grumpy-looking redcaps stood there. I had apparently woken them up from napping on the job. "What do you want, Crow?" "To see Nina," I said. "Ah, that ain't happening, brah," said the other. "She's got company already." The first one elbowed him in the ribs. "Dumbass, you weren't supposed to tell him that she was here." They both started going at each other with fists flailing. Redcaps, in case you didn't know, are imports from the British Isles. They've been here long enough to lose their accents. They're small, annoying, bloodthirsty goblins. The largest one I ever encountered stood just under 5 feet tall, but by small, I do not mean harmless. You wouldn't want to run into one in a dark alley. They love to kill humans, each other, animals. They used to dye their caps red in the blood of their victims. Ever heard of the gang called the Bloods? Wear red bandanas on their heads? Yeah, well, who do you think started that trend? If there's gang activity in an area, drive-by shootings, drug violence, you will find redcaps. They look like white, short, ugly gangbangers. As a general rule, I just steer clear of them. Sometimes I can't, and this was one of those times. At least it was only 2 of the little fuckers. "Excuse me, gentlemen," I said. They stopped punching each other long enough to look at me. "I need to see Nina." "She will see me. If she finds out you stopped me, the representative of the law in this district, she will be angry and embarrassed. And I don't think either one of you would care to be the cause of her embarrassment." "Fine, we'll let you in. Chewy, let her know he's here," said the first one. Chewy headed up a metal staircase at the back of the loading dock. I was still standing outside. "Can I at least come in out of the cold while I wait?" I asked. "Yeah, all right. Come in," said the first one. I took a step inside and closed the door behind me. It was warm and dark and smelled of lumber and dust. There was a small space heater next to a card table, and a couple of folding chairs where I imagined the two had been napping before I disturbed them. Empty 40 cans littered the floor. One thing was for sure. Leo kept better digs than Nina. There was some yelling from the rooms upstairs. Chewie came back at a run a few seconds later. "She says you can come up if you want, but she's in a meeting right now. It'd be better if you came back later, brah," said Chewie. "What if I need to see her now?" I asked. He shrugged and made a face. You won't like it up there right now. You may as well stay down here for a bit and have a drink with us. Redcaps like to invite you for a drink and then slit your throat and steal your wallet and your clothes. I was missing enough body parts already, and I didn't want to lose my new coat, too. Nah, I'll just go up now. "All right, brah, but it's ugly up there," said Chewie, elbowing the first guy in the side and winking. They both started laughing hysterically. "What?" I asked. "Nothing. Just Mondays is the day she plays ponies, that's all," said the first redcap. I didn't bother to ask what that meant. I probably should have. When I got to the top of the stairs, I could hear Nina barking orders in her office at the end of the hall. Once past the loading dock, the decor improved immensely, if you were living in a cat house in the 1970s. The walls were deep burgundy, the floors carpeted in a plush ivory color. Brass sconces shaped like naked nymphs held lamps that lit the hallway in just the perfect low lighting. Pictures of women and men involved in various lurid sexual activities hung on the walls, framed in ornate gold frames. The air was thick with the scent of jasmine and sex. My feet sank into the carpet as I walked along the hallway. It was hot, and I began to sweat a bit. My bandaged ear started to itch. At the end of the hallway was the door to her office. I knocked. She opened the door naked from the waist up, except for a miniature black top hat with a small black net veil covering her face. The rest of her outfit consisted of black thigh-high boots that were held up by her garter belt. In one hand she held a riding crop. A tattoo of a two-headed serpent snaked from one areola across the back to the other, a nipple in each mouth. She looked pissed. "Can't this wait until regular business hours, Judge?" she said. "I'm in the middle of a training exercise with my staff." "It's the middle of the day on a Monday. What exactly do you consider to be regular business hours, Nina?" I asked. "By the way, nice hat." She glared at me. "Fine. Come in and sit down." She gestured to a high-backed velvet-covered chair next to the door. I sat down. Across from my chair she had her ponies lined up, 6 incubi with bits in their mouth and bridles covering their heads. There were hobbles on their hands and knees, and they faced the wall. Realistic horse tails hung down from the cleft in their backsides. I didn't want to know how the tails were attached. None of the ponies turned to look at me, and I tried my best not to look at them. I now understood why Saul had retired, and I wondered what he had on Nina to be able to retire. Nina walked over to her desk and picked up a small remote control and then turned to face me. "I assume your debate with Mr. Lewis is to blame for your surprise visit and your ghastly appearance," she said, caressing the backsides of the ponies with her riding crop as she paced behind them. "I wouldn't call it a debacle," I said. "Your kind should be happy. I am a pretty lazy individual, and I don't inspect on a regular basis." "I suppose you're right," said Nina. She took one of her ponies by the reins and led him around the room, clucking her tongue to make him leap over her riding crop occasionally. "Mr. Lewis would love what you're doing here," I said. She turned around and glared at me. I could see the cracks in her skin starting to form and the glowing magma underneath. "Never compare me to that disgusting shit," said Nina. He isn't even close to being in the same league as me. His methods are barbaric and belong back in the Dark Ages. He is ineffective at best and dangerous to the company's image at worst. I'm glad you refused to have him in the city. He'd have taken us all down with him if that had been allowed. Is that why you backed that decision, Nina? I've always wondered about that, I asked. This is an age of science and logic and unbelief, Crow. There is no reason to keep people fearful of a hostile takeover of their body and soul. His methods are too brutal for modern society. Now it's easier to just work in the background, controlling things without the overt showiness. No need for shock and awe, she said. He gave the game away back in '49. They made a fucking movie about it. Won a goddamn Academy Award for the story. Scared the shit out of a lot of people. Didn't help our cause in the slightest. He's an embarrassment, and he would have caused us more trouble than help if he had been allowed to stay here. Makes sense, I said. She clucked her tongue again to get the pony to jump over an ottoman. He failed. She touched a button on the remote, and all of the incubi spasmed and gasped in pain. She held up the remote to show me. Electrodes in the butt plugs and bits, she said, smiling. She sighed in contentment. I just love modern technology. She led the offending pony back to his place in line. I could hear muffled sobbing coming from one of them. Nina, I didn't come here to talk about Mr. Lewis or butt plugs, I said. I'm here to talk about the investigation into Pastor Jeremiah Anderson. What about it? She asked. I thought you had finished that when you blew up his place a few months back. No, the investigation is ongoing. He set up shop in the north part of town in an old Kmart, I said. You might be making quota now, but that won't last if he keeps going. And I still have some questions about him that haven't been answered to my satisfaction yet. Questions, she said. And I'm guessing you're interested because your little pet human is dead, huh? Well, we all have our pets. She hit the button on the remote again, and the incubi convulsed in pain. My questions are about the preacher man before he started his church, I said. A source informed me that one of your employees had him in his possession at one point until a very unusual exorcism occurred. She turned to face me. The cracks on her face, neck, and shoulders appeared again. The two snakeheads started to glow red and writhe on her body. The ponies started to whimper. The room's temperature increased. And what source told you this? She asked. I don't have to reveal my sources, Nina, I said. You know that. It was Leo, wasn't it? Greedy bastard wants my turf. Has since he's got here. She walked closer to me, and I could feel the heat radiating off of her. The sweat under my bandages was making me itch uncomfortably. I know it was him, Crow. I can't give you that information. Judicial privilege. She leaned closer to me. I could see that her bottom half had changed into its true serpentine form. Her breasts were right under my chin now. The snake heads hissed at me. Come on, Judge. You can tell me. Her hands slid to my crotch. Get off me, bitch. I could feel her trying to fondle me through my clothes and being disappointed by the lack of response she was receiving. What the fuck is wrong with you, Crow? She glared at me. Oh, I know. Her face and form started to change. Her hair grew darker, her voice softened, and soon it was Amanda sitting on my lap. She laid her head on my shoulder. I knew it wasn't her, but it looked like her. She smiled at me, and for a moment I wanted to hold her, but then I remembered that I had a snake sitting in my lap. I pushed her off and stood up. That shit doesn't work on me, Nina, I said. Judges aren't made with that weakness you can so easily exploit in everybody else. Lust doesn't mean just sex, Crow. She spoke with Amanda's voice. It hurt me to see Amanda's body crumpled on the floor, even though I knew it was still Nina. She spoke again, crawling towards me on the floor. Lust is only desire. Desire to possess, desire to control, desire to be with someone who will never be yours. I can be whoever you want, whenever you want, as long as you don't ask me any more questions. You could come here and visit Amanda whenever you want. You can do anything you want with her, and she will never reject you again. She was curled at my feet now, laying her head on my thigh. I touched her hair for a moment. No. No, she screeched. No! How dare you! She was no longer Amanda. She was Nina in all her molten serpent glory. She twisted her body around me, squeezing me. The heat was unbearable. My jacket started smoking. Her entire body was now a serpent with her demonic face on top. She still had on the ridiculous hat, and we were eye to eye now. Nina, you have nothing I could ever want. You are only offering me lies and illusion. You could never be Amanda, I said. I tried to get some more air into my lungs, but I could feel my ribs starting to crack. Release me, or the report I file for obstruction of an official investigation will do more damage to you than what will come from answering my questions. She slowly released me from her coils and slithered back to her desk, where she returned to her Barbie-esque form. She lit a cigarette and jammed the button on the remote a few more times until one of the ponies collapsed. Sorry about that momentary lapse in judgment. No offense, she said. I'll answer whatever questions you have of me. She held the button down for a few seconds and smiled at me through clenched teeth. I need your files on Jeremiah Anderson, and I need the name and current whereabouts of the possessing entity involved, I said, and your insurance that he will not skip town. I'll have the files delivered to you tomorrow afternoon, she said, walking behind her desk and opening a drawer. The demon in question is a soul eater level 1. He's been on probation since the incident you mentioned. I have him working as a bouncer at Q. Name's Amnon. He won't leave. If he does, he will have to deal with me. And no one likes dealing with me. Good. That's all I needed, I said. You will be discreet, I trust. She pulled out a harness from a drawer in her desk and began fastening it around her surgically whittled waist and thighs. I will do what I can, I said. She turned around to face me, and I saw she had an enormous phallus strapped to her body. She hit the remote again and looked at me and smiled. If there isn't anything further, I have staff development to attend to, Judge. I'll let myself out. I turned and left the room. My brain hurt. My ribs hurt. My head hurt. My hand hurt. I smelled like burnt leather. I was done with this whole fucking day. I walked back out through the plush hallway and down the metal stairs. The 2 redcaps were at their table playing dominoes and drinking. I nodded to them as I walked out the door. The snow was still falling, but it was mixed with rain now, leaving the snow on the sidewalk with a thick crust of ice on top. The cement that wasn't covered with snow was now covered with a layer of bumpy ice. I picked my way back to the limo, and Z drove me home. When I got inside, I poured myself a glass of whiskey, and I sat down on the couch. Kitty came and joined me a minute later. It was starting to get dark outside, and I could hear the sleet hitting the windows in waves. I sipped my whiskey and stroked Kitty, who sat down on my lap and started kneading my chest with her paws. My ribs were still sore and the kneading hurt, but I let her continue. I decided I wasn't leaving the confines of my property for the next 48 hours until I had at least one of my injuries healed. I had plenty to do here, and Amnon wasn't going anywhere.